All right, I'm back.
All right. Sounds good. Good. All right. Now streaming.
Cool. Excuse me.
Bless you. But yeah, after the stream, let's stay on the call for like 10 minutes and just talk, catch up.
Sounds good. Let's do it. Dude, Dota chess is actually like one of the best things that's ever happened to Dota.
I agree.
Amazing. I'm so happy for it. I don't even play it. I'm just so happy about it that people are loving it.
And coming to the game.
Yes, it's fucking great for us.
There's so many streamers, dude, that are like from other games that are just playing Dota chess all the time.
Yeah.
Pretty great.
Did you delete things in our email? The Dota Alchemy email?
I usually don't delete stuff. I just move all the patron leads to a specific folder.
Intro cave. Oh, that's where you got the breaking news thing from.
Yeah, you should download that so you have it.
That's fucking awesome. Oh, we can legally like use that, right?
Yeah, I paid $10 for it.
Sweet. Oh man, I gotta get an intro for the Ursa. I don't know what I'm gonna call that series, but like I don't know. Hero. I'm already doing Heroes of the Week, so that.
Yeah, we'll brainstorm that after the stream and figure it out.
Okay, maybe chat can help. Hello, friends. Kevin Stack. Why do I feel like that's not your last name? Don't lie to me, Kevin.
Jesus, Kevin. This is
come on, Kevin.
A circle of trust. You're losing your representation in the circle of trust by lying.
How am I supposed to? When I read somebody's name like this, how am I supposed to automatically trust somebody and want to get to know them? What's going on, dog? What's going on, Big D?
What?
What's going on?
Yeah, just got home. She's yelling at the dogs.
But get the dogs on stream. Oh my god. The amount of times that I accidentally click and open Sony Vegas, I swear to fuck, I should move it so it's not right by Google Chrome. Jesus. What's wrong with me? Opening up Photoshop or Sony Vegas or something like that is so awful because it takes so long to
stream
open
right now.
And just to close it.
I love you. How was your day?
Vegas Pro has stopped working. Yeah, that's because I fucking deleted you in my task manager.
Yeah, we went to the beach. They played with the husky puppy.
Just die with some grace, will you? 1 sec. 1 sec.
What happened to it makes you feel like that? All right, let's get in.
Hello?
All right, I'm back. I am back. I'm gonna do the intro for Alchemy Answers episode 20.
Let's do it.
And
let's go.
Then can you post in Discord that we're doing this?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll just do all your dirty work. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Well, I have you on Discord.
Asshole. I'm just kidding, dude. Relax, man. See, this is the thing. I work with this guy all the time, and he's just so like aggressive towards me. He's just it's a very like domestic abuse sort of relationship, except over the internet. Like it's psychological abuse. You know what I mean?
One more word, and I cut you.
See, this is how he always gets. Next, he's gonna start talking about guns and why Donald Trump is gonna be the future king of the world and all these sorts of things.
Please stop. Please stop. Man, you type really slowly.
I do not type really slowly. Holy shit, man! I'll type race you at the end of this stream and fucking destroy you. I'll give it to you hard.
That's funny.
All right.
Funny. Okay,
Let's
so
go.
thank you everyone for tuning into Alchemy Answers episode 20, the big 2-0. I remember when I turned 20 years old, and Alchemy Answers is a lot more beautiful and hunky than I was at that point. So
I refuse to believe that. I absolutely refuse. I've seen your body. You are a hunk, sir.
Well, thank you, and thank you to our viewers for tuning in for yet another episode. We got some great questions from our patrons. Thank you to our patrons for supporting us and being the primary questions that we're going to be answering. But as we only have a few of them so far, we will definitely be taking some questions from chat today as well. And without further ado, let's get into the first question.
Okay. Let's see. Lots of discussion going on in here. Best way to deal with buffed Nakes and Ursa. We answered that last week, so I guess they would start here. So, Sir Snipes a lot asks, question, as an offlaner in the mid game, how do you coordinate aggressive plays when the rest of your team is only focused on farming? That's a relatively general question, so I'm going to give you basically a lot of answers for that, but sometimes you just are dealt some cards in a game and you have to deal with that. If your team is absolutely refusing to fight, then as an offlaner, you can still do a job and still be aggressive, and essentially like use your life to make space, which will also get you farm, but you'll allow your team to play that like farming play style. Basically, like I would say that if your team is just farming, you can still win the game, because I've been playing a lot on a Smurf recently because my internet's pretty bad. So I'm just like, all right, I don't want to lose too much MMR on my main. We'll get into that's a whole other bag of worms. We'll get into that later, can of worms, whatever. But essentially, like if you have a team that's farming and they're farming, or whatever happens, like eventually a fight will occur between both teams and everybody will be there. Like chances are that will happen. So if you are giving them space to farm, and you just are the reason that your team, when that fight does occur, your team has more farm than them because of you, then like you're winning the game as an offlaner. So I would say that it's not like an inherently negative thing that your team is doing that, or at least you can view it as something that's not like inherently negative. However, I would say that like in terms of coordinating aggressive plays, you don't need a lot of heroes. Like for instance, if your team is splitting up to farm, then what that's going to do, if they're farming creep waves, which is a better version of farming, basically that's going to force the enemy team to split up as well. And then you can coordinate an aggressive play either alone or with one of your teammates and kill an enemy in like a specific location. Let's say your team is split pushing in all the lanes, so the enemy team splits up, and then you just go to like the bot lane and go for a gank there. You know that that's just going to be one or two heroes down there because they have to split up to deal with your team pushing in all of the other waves. So essentially, like you can do aggressive plays with less heroes, and then once the enemy team is dead, people will be a lot more likely to group up for like a tower push, and then the game state changes from kind of that farming state to your team is actually in an area. It's kind of like Donnie said in the last week's replay review session, Spirit Breaker. Like he puts a target on somebody, and when the enemy team is dead and there's a tower, like that kind of puts a tower available like for free. That basically puts a target on the tower, and even like a bunch of idiots will group up and push if it's a free push, because everybody wants to win Dota. Even if they're farming, they'll like group up and push. So I don't know. Like I said, lots of answers to like kind of a general question. What do you think, Donnie?
Yeah, I think that what you said is all definitely true. I had a fairly similar realization to this earlier today when I was playing, just that generally when you go into a game, you have like a tempo that you want to play. And let's say, for example, that you pick a hero like Huskar or Razor, who's a very up-tempo hero, and you want to be like being aggressive and taking early towers and taking early fights and playing around that style. But what if your team just all gets a Midas? Like what can you do at that point? Are you just gonna say, all right guys, let's take a fight, even though you have literally no items and no HP and nothing other than a Midas? Most people will probably do that because it's just natural to just want to take a fight, because that's what you do. You just take a fight, and then you fight again, and then you fight again, you fight again, and then eventually the game ends. And that's like the general experience in most pubs. But just because you have an idea of how the tempo of the game is supposed to go doesn't mean that all of your teammates are going to agree, and they're going to do their own thing. And so a lot of the time you have to just kind of do a job that's available to you that may not be the main job that you want to be doing, but at least you're doing some job that's important. So whether that could be, let's say you want to push towers, but nobody wants to push towers with you. So, you just farm and you keep the creep waves out because the rest of your team's in the jungle hitting creeps or something like that. Or you don't have a BKB and you need one to go fight because you're a Sven or, something like that, an anti-mage against a bunch of lockdown. And your team's like, all right, we're going to go fight here. We're going to go fight here. We're going to go fight here. And you're like, no, I need my BKB before we go. Well, your team's going to make a decision, and that might not be the decision that you want to make. And so at that point, do you just go and fight and lose the game and get farther and farther behind on your anti-mage? Hopefully not. Hopefully you just decide, okay, well, I'm going to do the job that I can that still benefits my team, which might be to split push a tower while they're taking a fight and get some pressure, get the creeps to their base. This is the kind of thing that you have to deal with a lot in pubs, which is that you're going to have an idea, your team's going to have an idea. If they line up, you probably are going to be playing very, very well and playing very fast and winning the game a lot. But if they don't line up, you're going to have to pick sort of like the next best option for you to be doing things that also still kind of helps your team's other game plan. And a lot of the time, like you said, especially as an offlaner, that could literally just be creating space with your own life. Because if your whole team is buying 4 Midases and sitting in your jungle and your side of the map farming, and you're able to draw the entire enemy team to their tier 2 tower or their tier 3 tower over and over and over and over and over, eventually your 4 Midas team is going to have enough farm to beat them.
I actually kind of want to piggyback off of that because I remember why I brought up the Smurf thing, but I played a few games with my brothers-in-law. Last season they were Divine. This season I think they both calibrated to be Ancient. I think a lot of people calibrated lower. So basically when we party queued, we were playing in like low Divine / Ancient bracket, and something that I realized in this bracket that's largely different from the Immortal bracket. And I would assume all the brackets below are going to be the same because this is more of like a negative thing. It's like a misunderstanding of a concept or a misconception, is that people seem to think that the only way to progress the game forward is to take and win a fight and then get an objective off of that. But you can actually get objectives or fight when you're behind or progress the game forward in many different ways by just splitting the map and essentially farming. It's just that it's not the farming that's important. Your team might think that that's important because they're anti-mages and begging for their next item, etc. But it's more so that the enemy team has to split up to deal with you, and you could get a tower in that time where they're dealing with your team on the opposing side of the map. Like, you could essentially use your team as a distraction. And the reason that I brought up the Smurf again is because there was a liking game that I played recently where essentially we couldn't fight the enemy team. They had some like Tidehunter, super farmed Razor, these heroes that essentially like would just obliterate us in a team fight. So I ended the game with almost no kills because the only time that I was going for a kill was when one person would come to deal with me. And I spent the entirety of the game waiting for the enemy team to 5-man to my team. I would take a tower, they'd 5-man to me, and I'd go run away, go jungle. They'd 5-man to my team, and they would just yo-yo across the map. And eventually, slowly but surely, their Razor, who was destroying, was like level 13, when our carry was level 15 or 16, because they were just spending so much time getting yo-yoed across the map and still losing objectives. I think we eventually got 2 racks without even taking a fight with them, because they just didn't have the resources to deal with our split pushing. I think even if we fought them, like, we couldn't have fought them still at that point. But because they have the resources to fight you, doesn't mean they have the resources to deal with your split pushing, especially when they have Razor, Tidehunter, these heroes that don't farm that quickly, but really like to fight and essentially win games by just fighting better than you.
Yep.
Just don't fight.
Yeah.
You don't have to fight, and you can push the game forward in like a lot of other ways as well.
Yep, exactly. I don't have anything else to add, so let's go on to the next question.
Yeah, this was a long tangent, but we have more questions. Don't worry. Hawkillionaire, this is the Smurf, the 6K Smurf. Um, says, during the laning phase, how do you prioritize who to gank slash shut down? Mid, their safe lane carry, or to protect slash harass your own safe lane? Essentially, who gets priority, or how do you work out who has the priority? Please answer broadly across all examples. Then he gives an example, but essentially, like, okay, I've thought about this a lot recently, just because Donnie and I make so many.
Very complicated question, to be honest.
It's a very complicated question, but for me in particular, like I feel like I have a pretty specific opinion of like how the game should be played, because of course Donnie and I like make videos about it, so I feel like I've written it down. It's kind of like writing it down gives you a more solidified opinion on it, where you actually know, like, okay, this is what I think, and this is why I think this, and it's not just impulse or mix and match of these different ideas that I've learned. But essentially, I was thinking, like, there's still so much to it that there are lessons that I remember learning like 2 years ago or 1 year ago, where it's like, oh, fuck, this is a problem for me now, or this is a problem for this person that I'm watching their replay review. But how many times did I miss this really important concept that I could have brought up during other replay reviews because I just literally didn't think about it? And going back to your question, I was thinking about the concept of like analyzing a draft and figuring out who to gank, who to shut down, like what to actually do given a particular draft. I think people were asking in terms of like team fight priority. That was kind of what I was thinking about. But in terms of like who to gank in the laning phase, who to protect in the laning phase, these are all equivalent questions. It's just at different points in Dota. Team fighting is in the mid game, laning is in the early game. But essentially, I would say that the majority of this, if you wanted a flowchart, which is when I was in the shower the other day thinking this as a shower thought, I was thinking like, oh man, I want to make a general flowchart for this. But it always starts with like, what is your win condition? And that's a hard question to answer. But usually in Dota, in a relatively simple draft, there is like a hero on your team that is going to win the game, and then a hero on the enemy team that is going to win the game at a specific timing. There's always a timing, there's always a power spike, and you always aim for like essentially the easiest one. So Spectre gets a Radiance. That's a power spike. You probably want to fight around that. Everything up until that point should just be focusing on that Spectre getting that Radiance. Anti-Mage gets Battle Fury, maybe Abyssal Blade plus Manta Style. That's like the timing for Anti-Mage. So everything up until that point should focus on that Anti-Mage. And within that context, you basically need to look at the enemy team and figure out, is there any hero that if I don't shut that hero down, they will stop that timing? If so, then you need to have some of your focus in the draft and in the game, whether it's your 4-roll stalks them around the jungle or whatever, focused on shutting down that hero. If it's like a Shadow Fiend or a Storm or whatever it is, you want to shut down that timing, that will stop your timing. And sometimes there's multiple timings, multiple power spikes, and that's where things get kind of difficult when you have like 3 really strong cores versus 3 really strong cores. It's kind of like you basically hope to go late, eventually take a Roshan and then high ground. But then there's still a particular way that your heroes are going to want to play the map. For instance, Terrorblade likes to sit in the enemy jungle and send illusions down a lane until he outfarms everybody. You take a fight where the enemy team is essentially running away. He comes in with meta, kills 3 people, you take racks. We've even recently seen like EG when they play with Arteezy on Terrorblade, they will leave all tier 1s up except for the safe lane tier 1 and tier 2, and they'll play around the high ground and look to fight, kill the enemy team, and then racks. Like 15-20 minutes in the game. That's their play style, and it's a good timing. But basically, to sum it all up, you essentially want to look for your power spikes, the enemy team's power spikes, and then try your fucking hardest to make those power spikes happen for you and stop them from happening on the enemy team. And if you get it wrong, you get it wrong. That's why it's a complicated game. But that's the starting point, essentially. That's what you need to think about.
So I have a slightly different answer. I kind of agree to you, but I also kind of disagree in the sense that
I know what you're about to say.
I don't believe that if you have like a Spectre who needs the Radiance timing, that Spectre's Radiance timing becomes your main focus as a team, because generally speaking, most teams have various heroes that have different levels at which they become strong. Obviously, if you have something like a a Razor in your mid lane and then you have a Spectre in your safe lane, the Spectre and the Razor are going to be stronger at different points in the game. And so I think that maybe a more complicated but possibly more effective way to think about it.
For the record, I said this is where the flowchart starts. Like,
Yeah.
where you're going with this is how, like,
don't get offended, dude.
I'm just saying, like if you watch VP play, they basically execute what you're saying perfectly.
Yes. Yeah. So here's the whole thing. This is like the full picture. That I think is fairly hard to execute in pubs, but it's something that you can kind of do. And you can kind of take this role a lot of the time. So basically, if you have a Razor and you have a Spectre, you should focus on making the Razor have a good early game so you can have a good early to mid game. And then his good early to mid game will allow your Spectre to have a good mid game, which is going to allow your Spectre to get to the late game with a good mid to late game, which is going to allow your Spectre to actually hit his power spike and win you the game. And this is what VP does, is they do a very good job, and a lot of pro teams do this now, where they have a tempo setting core and a tempo setting 4 role usually. And those two heroes are going to be the ones that really control the pace of the game between 10 and 20 minutes. And then they're going to have their hard carry, their position 1, whether it's a Medusa in the mid lane or an Arc Warden or Terrorblade in the safe lane. And that is going to be the one that is just kind of like this weak, can contribute, but probably won't very much until he absolutely has to or gets to his actual power spike timing. And I think in pubs, something that you can do is, generally speaking, you can assume that every single person on your team will play greedier than they should, because that's just what pubs do. Every single pub player will play greedier than they should, and that's why you have supports getting blink daggers at like 12 minutes, even though they probably should be buying wards and only have brown boots, but nobody's going to do that in a pub game. You're going to have people going Midas Radiance with nothing else, because that's what people do in pub games. So what you need
competitive too recently.
Yeah. So what you may need to do is, let's say you pick let's say you pick a Monkey King in the safe lane, or let's say you pick a what's another good example? A Viper in the mid lane, something like that. And you are a hero. Let's go with the Monkey King example. So you're Monkey King in the safe lane. You have a reasonably good lane. It's not the best lane. You're not like completely snowballing, but you have a pretty good lane. A lot of people are probably just going to go Battle Fury because they're the safe lane. They want to get farm. They're just going to, do that farming thing where they play their own solo game hitting creeps and then eventually come back to the fight and win in the late game. But if their whole team, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier with the intentionality thing, goes back to, okay, the rest of their team is playing greedy. Their Earthshaker is just farming his Blink Dagger instead of actually ganking with Fissure. He doesn't think he can do anything without a Blink Dagger. The Lion, who's the position 5, is farming the jungle and trying to get his Blink Dagger because he feels like he can't do anything without a Blink Dagger. Now you're a Monkey King who is the position 1. You're supposed to be the late game insurance policy. You're supposed to be the carry. But if you go Battle Fury right now, you're going to get absolutely run over. So you have to go something else. You have to go like Phase Boots, Echo Saber, Shadow Blade, BKB, that kind of stuff, and play a less greedy, more tempo setting style of carry, and just accept that while you are the quote-unquote position 1, you're not actually a real position 1, because if you do play a real position 1, you guys are going to lose the game. So yeah, I think that what you said is correct, is that like,
it's a long tangent.
You want to focus on your win condition, but there usually has to be a couple stages to get to that win condition. And if you don't, if you don't go through the stages, if you don't have like the mid game stage and then the mid late game stage and then the late game stage, which is your actual win condition, then you're never going to get to that late game stage. So you actually have to have somebody to kind of like progress you to that actual win condition, who usually is not your win condition.
This is why like teams have started tri-laning Beastmasters and Timbersaws and even like Magnuses.
Yes.
It's because I have to say, one person that was like super ahead of the curve on this concept, like this is not an old concept. This is like a relatively new thing. to like sacrifice a hard carry and then have them come back in the mid game, and instead of it's just because like generally it's a lot easier to support that early tempo controlling hero because they're better in the early game.
Yeah.
So they'll have as much as, but they'll do more in the mid game, which it essentially just equates to more farm eventually for the carry than if you were to support the carry in the early game. But Sunby was super ahead of the curve on this. I remember for the longest time he would play Spectre safe lane, and he would literally tell his team, "Fuck off, go kill mid." This was when ganking mid was really good. Go do lane the off lane, like do whatever you can to just win all the other lanes, overwhelm people with this weird strategy, and then he'll just be fine. Eventually get a couple of kills with Haunt, come back by jungling, because then all the other heroes would be so farmed. But Spectre is good at coming back, whereas like these tempo controlling heroes, how does a Razor come back?
Exactly.
Like Razor's not like it actually makes a lot of sense. And now Sunby's the coach of Team Secret. Team Secret's the best team in the world, arguably. Yep. And this sort of playstyle happens to be in the meta. I don't think that's a fucking coincidence that this guy is like one of the best, arguably, well, one of the best coaches in the world, because it's hard to compare him with Seb, but it's like, this guy's a very good coach, tier 1 coach, and this is the way that he's always thought about Dota. Playing pubs with him, I know this is the way he's always thought about Dota. So yeah, it is a lot more complicated to think about it that way, and you're still technically speaking or thinking about the Spectre's Radiance timing. It's just you're doing it in a less intuitive way, but Spectre still technically with this playstyle should be stronger earlier on into the game. Like,
right, because like even if you,
or the whole team, I should say, the whole team will essentially be stronger, but Spectre will still get strong and still have a timing where they win the game.
It basically just gives you like a smoother path to victory, as opposed to like having to hit this one hard timing where you're going to win the game. Like if you have a Spectre and you have an Axe in the off lane, and you could win the safe lane, but your Spectre's still going to be contested. He's still going to miss last hits because there's going to be people harassing him.
He's still not going to do as much as an Axe.
Yeah, and like even 15 minutes in, your Spectre's going to have like, if he's lucky, a relic, and that's not going to do anything. But if you can give your Axe a good 12 minutes, he's going to have a blink dagger, and he's going to be able to kill anybody on the map. Which is going to
can leave him alone, and then you can either support the Spectre can get farm, or Spectre can buy a fucking Midas, and you run around with this super powerful Axe. Spectre farms her whole jungle. Like,
yep,
yeah. Once again, it is definitely the way to play Dota, but it all stems from like you need to think about like at what point you're actually going to win the game. Sometimes I think we watched a replay in the replay analysis like last week where we saw an anti-mage, and usually anti-mage is your win condition, but they were just running around and fighting. Anti-mage was dying a lot, and then they just won the game because the early game heroes were doing so well on their timing that they didn't need the anti-mage to hit his timing. Yeah. Sometimes that happens too, and that's kind of why this new strat, in terms of like focusing on your win condition and focusing on the early game tempo controllers, is why this is smoother and it's easier, because you have the chance to just dominate so hard in the early game that you just win there. You don't need your Spectre to get a fucking Radiance. You just end the game, you know? So it's definitely, there's a lot more opportunity to actually win the game with that sort of thought process.
Anyway, that's why it's really nice to have like a Huskar and then like some hard carry like a Luna or like,
I love that shit.
Something like that where it's like, okay, we can probably just win the game at 18 minutes, or if we don't, we have like something that's going to win the game at 40.
Right. It's like when there's like a Brood plus Huskar plus Timbersaw. It's like, have fun dealing with all of these fucking heroes, man. Yeah. You know? But then it's great to have like one of these late game, Slark or something. So if you do go late, you don't just lose the game because you have no late game carry. Like your Slark will still be huge. That's why it's always frustrating in pubs. Like I played a Huskar game the other day where we were just destroying in the early game. And I'm pretty sure that the Slark that I had was an account buyer, because I looked at his profile and it was just all rank ups and 90% win rates with Huskar and stuff like that. But basically we destroyed them in the early game, took all of their towers, and then we got to the late game somehow because we kind of fucked up. And the Slark was super farmed, but he was running into fights and dying without like pressing BKB or pressing ultimate. It's like, well, I mean, those are fuck ups and those happen. I totally get that. But it's very unfortunate that the guy that's supposed to be absolutely a monster at that point of the game isn't, just because of these mechanical misplays in crucial fights. Yep. You know what I mean?
Sometimes that happens.
It's really rough. But like late game as like a Huskar, there's a lot less that you can do because it's like you have this early game timing. and you hit that, and sometimes you hit that timing just to make space for these other heroes. And but that's pubs. Those games are bound to happen. Okay, so RFX. Follow-up question to the same question that we just answered. In what circumstances is it to adjust to a tri-lane? For example, when should we match tri-lane with tri-lane? When should we stay 2-1-2? And when should we create our own tri-lane versus their solo laner? God, these are relatively complicated questions.
Yeah, it's like competitive questions that would basically never apply to your pubs. But I know why he's asking is because he's playing in like the Reddit Dota 2 league or something like that with a squad. So he is really thinking more deeply about team play, which doesn't apply to a whole lot of people usually, but it is definitely something that we can address.
These are like complicated captain questions, but I would say that generally, like, when it comes to playing in these leagues and playing competitively, and when you should adjust to have certain lane matchups, you should trust your teammates. Like, if your team says, I don't want to lane, if your teammate says, I don't want to lane against this hero, I won't have a game. Or if your team says, I will fucking obliterate this hero, give me a lane against it. And then your other core that would be swapping lanes with that person says, yeah, I'll do fine in this scenario. That's when you swap the lanes. Like, it's really hard to look at a draft and then look at the enemy draft and be like, here's the perfect lane matchup. You know, it's more like the people that play the heroes that are going to be laning need to be the ones that understand if they can completely destroy a lane. Like, for instance, I was playing with Complexity Death the other day, and they picked Lifestealer versus his Batrider. I was Ursa as a support, and I just essentially followed around the Lifestealer, and he followed around the other hero that he picked in order to, I think it was like a Terrorblade or something. He wanted to lane against that. And we kept swapping that, and he kept saying, TP. This guy TP'd, we TP. And I think they ended up feeding couriers at like 7 minutes into the game because they couldn't handle the lanes. That's when you want to swap the lanes, essentially, when either there's an opportunity for the enemy team to get a lane matchup where they have like 3 winning lanes, or when there's an opportunity for you to have like 3 winning lanes or 2 super winning lanes, where like you have a Bat versus a Terrorblade, which is a completely destructive matchup. Terrorblade feeds every time. But in order to know these matchups, like, you're not going to be able to know that as a captain. You need to trust your cores to make those decisions, where it's like, I'm a Batrider player. I know that Batrider fucking annihilates Terrorblade. Maybe you don't because you're not an offlane player, but I know that, and you need to trust me when I make that decision. And if I get that wrong, that's on me. Essentially, like in competitive, I think that's how most captains do it. Like, we can see in like the True Sight, Kuroki asks like Miracle what he wants to play, and he's just like, give me this. Give me this. And he just trusts him. He just gives it to him because it's like, it's essentially understood that just in that game, he knows that hero is going to do really well because that's his role. That's his job to know that.
So yeah, definitely there is some weight. There is quite a bit of weight placed on the player's like feel of the lane. As far as like when to tri lane, when not to tri lane. I mean, that's kind of tough to differentiate just because like it's still kind of hard to tell whether tri lanes are like really that good at this point. You know, dual lanes are still very popular. I think if you want a tri lane, it's probably because kind of what we were saying in that last sort of like tempo controlling thing. It's because you really want to just get a specific hero off to a very fast start and put a lot of pressure on a specific hero. And then if you can't get that matchup, then you just don't tri lane. Like, also you have to have the heroes to tri lane. If you have a Luna plus, 2 aggressive heroes, that's probably a pretty decent tri lane because Luna works very well in tri lane. If you have a Undying and somebody like if you're trying to tri lane into an Undying, however, it's probably better to just split up your heroes and not tri lane into the Undying. If you have it, it's just so like game by game basis. I don't really know like the best way to answer when to tri lane.
It's pretty hard. That's why I would just say it's like within the jurisdiction of the cores. Like, if you have somebody who's really confident on a hero and they're just like, oh my god, if they tri lane us, we'll fucking destroy them. Just trust that person. If they get it wrong, call them an idiot. Like, that's the only, like, I would say you just, if there's a specific lane in the game that you can completely obliterate based on doing that lane, then just adjust the other lanes to suit that lane situation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't just arbitrarily like swap the lanes. You just if they want to tri lane you, let them tri lane you. If you know that your safe lane is like a good safe lane, you'll get farm but like you just want to do the swaps with a purpose. If you really feel like just something is incredibly good, then go with that.
Yep.
Essentially.
Okay.
Every team that I've ever played on, it's always been in the jurisdiction of like the cores, because they're the ones that need to have the good game to carry in like the mid game.
Yep. Any more questions from Discord?
Let me go ahead and take a gander at that there, Big D. No, it doesn't look like it. The last thing that's in here is see you ladies and gents on the flip side. There's a message that I wrote in there, so
okay. So let's just open it up to chat for the next 10 minutes and take some questions from chat.
I saw a question in chat. I saw a question in chat earlier that I want to address. Arfex says, "Do you love me?" And no, because of the things that I've been diagnosed with, I'm not capable of love, so I don't love anybody. But anyway, I saw a question in chat earlier, which was, how do you submit replays for our Thursday night replay review? The way that you do that is you go to patreon.com/Dota Alchemy and then check out the perks on there. Whatever, man. I'm just doing a little shameless shilling, but yeah, go ahead and check that out. That's how you submit those replays. Alternatively, we're going to try to get through them a little bit quicker this week by kind of doing like one lesson per replay, which in general I think is a good way to do coaching, even outside of replay reviews. But that's so we might get to like doing chat replays, but there are a lot of people that want replay reviews.
Yep. Okay, so some quick questions from chat. What's the answer to Lifestealer in this patch? I would say stuff like Ursa, Terrorblade.
Ursa's so good.
Yeah. Terrorblade's also very good.
Weaver's really good.
I think that Sven is reasonably good because he does a lot of heavy physical burst. PA is reasonably good.
My personal opinion on this Lifestealer hero is that like the only reason that he feels so good right now in the patch is because people have not adjusted their picks.
Yeah, I agree.
To destroy him. Like the amount of times that I'm just like a Necrophos versus, and this is including myself because I'm kind of playing. Well, number one, I was playing on a Smurf last week, so in Immortal games, I've been getting kind of fucked by people that are counter picking me. But then also like I'll pick like Batrider because that's a pick that I would pick in the last patch, and then some guy's a Lifestealer or Jug, and it's like, oh fuck, I can't do anything versus him. Why am I not just picking Ursa every game? Yeah. Like there are certain heroes in this patch that, given the subset of heroes that people are picking, there's almost never a bad Ursa game because people are still picking the same stuff from like the previous patch plus like 2 or 3 heroes. So I think that's a huge issue with like my own. I lost a bunch of calibration games on my main. I think that was a big issue with it. Was I was picking a lot of stuff that was like not taking into account the current strong carries. I was thinking about.
I really don't think Lifestealer is that good of a hero still. Like he got an okay buff to his movement speed, and that's about it. He's still the same hero that like really struggles to farm quickly. Doesn't contribute a whole lot in fights outside of like a Nake's bomb.
Dude, if you send that cocksucker to the jungle, we're demonetized because I just said that. But if you send him to the jungle, he does nothing. Like he jungles so slowly compared to a Terrorblade or something like that.
His attack speed is so garbage and just like
it's terrible.
Yeah, everything about that hero is actually pretty slow paced, and so the fact that he's winning is literally just because people are still picking like these really tanky aura heavy people that are like, let me just eat you because I'm a Lifestealer, you know?
Right. It's like you picked Lifestealer versus Centaur versus Batrider versus Magnus. Hell, even versus like a Necrophos. These heroes don't shit on Lifestealer when there is shitting on capacity there in this game. Like, I don't think Weaver got that much of a buff in the patch, but if Lifestealer, Ursa, and Sven are strong, then so is Weaver because he's so mobile. He's so annoying for them to try to catch. Like, the meta should definitely shift where these heroes are going to be considered broken even though they didn't really get buffed just because they destroy Lifestealer. That's why I think Ursa's really good too. Like Ursa's really good against Sven, really good against Lifestealer, basically just good against a lot of the stuff that people are picking in this patch. If people are still picking like PL, maybe Ursa's not that great because PL, well, Ursa's okay against PL, but you get what I'm saying. If people are picking like illusion heavy heroes, or if people are picking more Weavers, or if Ricky was like a carry people were picking, or any of these mobile heroes, Ursa wouldn't be as good.
Yep.
But the thing is, with almost every carry that's in the game, like Ursa can run them down.
Yep.
So if you are struggling with Lifestealer, pick an Ursa, run it as support, just run at that guy. He'll have such a terrible game. Weaver too, run it as support. You just need one hero to make that hero's life hell, and he feels so much less useful.
Yep. Okay. Proton Gelu says, a normal player that hasn't played any MOBA before Dota 2, after how much time of playing could he achieve 6k MMR? The answer to that is there's really no way to like give you an actual timeline. It totally depends on your practice habits, your talent.
What was the from what to what?
From nothing to 6k.
Nothing to 6k. I would say like 5 years of 4 to 5 years of being a pretty good practicer, a good learner.
Yeah, you have to be a very, very good like assimilator of knowledge, and you have to go into every single game you play with intention to learn and not just like to play Dota. You have to like study replays, study mechanics. There's a lot of work that goes into actually getting to 6k. You don't just like play Dota and eventually get there.
I think like yesterday, somebody was asking me about like one-on-one coaching and basically said, hey, I'm 3.6k MMR. I want to get to Immortal in 1 to 2 years. And I said like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said 1 to 2 years. He said 2 years. He said 2 years, not 1 to 2 years. And I was so glad that he said 2 years, because the amount of times that I've heard I'm going to drop everything and go pro in a year, it doesn't work like that. Like, number one, the reason that I liked what this dude said to me was because like getting Immortal is not equivalent to going pro. Like going pro is like steps above that. It's way harder to do the pro stuff. And that's almost like getting to Immortal is one task, and then going pro from Immortal is like as much work as that. So already saying 2 years to go Immortal is much more reasonable than saying I'm going to take a year, drop everything, and go pro. And then 2 years is also, I would say that depending on how quickly you can, like Donnie said, assimilate knowledge and actually internalize it and make things become your instinct, how quick of a learner you are, it could take 1 year if you're a quick learner, or 2 years if you're a relatively slow learner. But I think 3.6k MMR to 5.8k, which is Immortal, I think, is actually pretty reasonable. Assuming you're a decent learner, it might, if you're a really terrible learner, it might take like 3 years, but it's not this game, man. It's not something that just happens. Like, you can't just drop everything and learn it. People have invested so many hours into this game. Like, half of these Immortal players have been playing for like 10 fucking years or something like that. And they play like 12 hours a day, every day, and don't have jobs and live with their parents. Like, it's not a pretty sight, but that's honestly what it takes to get that high rated, just because it's a really hard game. Yep. And a lot of people are very, very addicted to it. So yeah, I think like 5 to 6 years from nothing to Immortal is reasonable, but then that's not even pro level yet.
Yep. Okay, here's another good question. If I'm a captain in captain's mode, is it fine to pick a good team lineup and ignore what the teammates say? I mean, if the lineup is good enough, it doesn't matter if the players are a little bit bad, right? The answer is hero comfort in most cases is way more important than hero composition. If you pick somebody in Ember Spirit and they've played the hero twice, and you're expecting them to be able to hit Slight into chains and have impact and dodge and not die, you are expecting way too much out of that person. So I think that I would much rather have a really shitty lineup of people on heroes that they know than the meta on heroes that, like, I see this so often in pubs. Somebody will like highlight a hero, and then some asshole in chat is like, you should pick this hero, and you should pick this hero, and you should pick this hero, and then we're gonna play this style of game. And they like have their own idea, and they tell everybody what to pick, and people are like, oh, well, I only play Invoker mid. And they're like, well, this game you should play OD. And he's like, I don't play OD. They're like, OD's a good pick against this hero. And so he picks OD, and he's literally never played OD, and he just gets fucking destroyed mid because he doesn't know the last hitting animation or how to fucking skill the hero or do anything useful on the hero. Much rather have this dude get completely obliterated mid on Invoker because he gets counterpicked, and then eventually come back and win in the late game because he actually knows how to cast his spells, than just be completely useless on a hero he has no idea what he's doing on.
I would say that competitively speaking, I've seen so many teams that I've been on, or like friends that are on teams, where they go through the phase of just saying fuck it, we're gonna pick a good draft, and so quickly they switch back to comfort picks. And basically like the way that tier 1 teams integrate the best heroes into their drafts and draft that kind of just good lineup style of Dota is that they grind all day and make these things their comfort picks. They get to know them. Some even use competitive
Do you
to
remember
learn
when
that, but
GH spent literally a month playing only Earth Spirit for like 8 to 12 games a day? Because he didn't play Earth Spirit, and he was on arguably the best team in the world as a 4 player with no Earth Spirit in his hero pool, and that's completely unacceptable in today's day and age as a professional Dota player. So he had to add Earth Spirit to his hero pool, and what did he do? He played the only that hero. He went to work. He actually treated Earth Spirit like a job and
yeah.
learned Earth Spirit to the point where he actually has very good Earth Spirit mechanics now and can pick it comfortably.
So if you're looking to practice in like a scrim, for example, you can pick people uncomfortable heroes and just pick a good draft. But it's with the intent of practicing. If you're
Yeah.
looking to win with the draft, you want to pick comfort and only pick those really good heroes if they practiced it and it's become comfortable for them. And I can say that like probably 10 to 15 teams that I've known the inner workings of the team. I've heard of this happening like so many times it occurs that it's like a common trend where captains always make the mistake of saying fuck it, I'm going to draft good Dota, but it's more like if a captain can't draft good Dota for a team, it's not because it's the player's fault. You know what I mean? Because they're not practicing these heroes that are good. Unless the captain is genuinely picking shitty drafts, but usually like good drafts are just dictated by players being very good with heroes. I think Heen said that in one of his videos. Like, it's not like the meta is people are just picking what Team Secret and everybody's picking. There's a meta out there that's way stronger than this shit that people aren't doing because the best teams haven't done it yet. It's just the good players that are dictating how the meta changes. It's not the other way around.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's always another meta. There's always a counter to the meta. Like, that's how Dota works. There's always some, like we were just saying, people are picking Lifestealer, and that hero's not even that good, but he's in every single game. And like, once we start seeing Weaver come back in as a carry, Lifestealer's just gonna go completely irrelevant again because he's useless against heroes like Weaver.
So Panos SF says, Jenkins, is it better to rush Desolator or Nullifier on Pudge? Yes. It is better to rush either of those items. Anyway, so lots of people are asking how to counter Kunkka mid. I would say that you want some sort of like persistent damage against Kunkka. The biggest issue with that piece of shit Captain Admiral cocksucker right now is that he's so tanky. He's so incredibly hard to kill that you need some sort of like long-lasting damage, like Death Prophet with the Spirit Siphon, Necrophos with the Heartstopper, or a Razor because you can drain Kunkka's damage and just keep hunting him down and hitting him. Like you can't just pick some normal mid laner against Kunkka and expect to own like some Tinker or some Pugna or OD. These heroes don't really do much in terms of killing him. That seems to me like what the biggest issue with Kunkka is that he can get so much out of a game because not only is he really effective in terms of team fights and damage, it's like all of these things are true, and he can build the same items and just feel unkillable with that boat buff. So he makes so much space, and it's so much harder dealing with like a hero that's doing a ton of damage in the mid game, like a core hero, when they haven't died at all. And Kunkka just never dies. So I think in general, like in a draft, you want some sort of hero that kills Kunkka, and basically Burst doesn't work. Boat buff, the regen talent that he gets, the fact that he has so much strength and builds into bracers and phase boots, which give armor. Like, you need something other than burst. You need persistent damage, and then you'll find that Kunkka is a lot less of an issue.
I bet Phoenix is pretty good against Kunkka in that regard, just because. Well,
I think
just because Kunkka doesn't have very good attack speed. Like, I mean, granted, he goes BKB, but he's also a very high HP pool, and Phoenix has Sunray. I don't know.
Phoenix is like, the Phoenix is definitely like, you would rather have a Phoenix on your team than something that doesn't do what Phoenix does. I wouldn't say it's like a hard counter as like something like a Necrophos. Necrophos loves playing against Kunkka, where Phoenix is good against Kunkka. I'd say you would probably want 2 Phoenix-esque heroes like that are as good as Phoenix against Kunkka, and then you're good. You don't need to worry about Kunkka because it's really hard dealing with like a Lifestealer or a Kunkka. They're in the exact same category, in my opinion, where like they feel like this uncounterable piece of shit hero, but only because they're not countered. Only because what they're doing in the game is not dealt with. If there's no way of piercing Lifestealer's BKB or kiting him or doing damage to him through the BKB, yes, he feels like a monster. But the problem is not that he's that good, it's that people aren't picking shit to deal with it. And I think Kunkka's within the same category right now. OD and these mid heroes, they don't deal with him well because they just do burst. Actually, OD's pretty good against Kunkka.
OD's pretty good against Kunkka.
So that wasn't a great example, but not really with the Astro build so much. But because Kunkka can just push the. But anyway, that's getting into like.
But also, you can
and stuff like that.
You can go stuff that has innate regen as well, like stuff like DK, Lycan, these heroes that can't really be pushed out of lane by
right. Counter it by doing exactly the same thing that Kunkka basically does.
Right.
That's an option.
Just make it so he can't just force you out of lane by just having more HP than you and cleaving you constantly.
Right, and then you're essentially doing the same thing as him in the game, where you're this tanky core that's never dying. Feels like such a problem for the enemy team. They have to invest so much into killing you. Yeah, that's an option. I would say like your ideal situation is like if you have a guy that's doing that as well, like a DK mid, and they use some hero on a side lane that can kill Kunkka in fights, like a Batrider, you're Gucci. That hero, it's not going to feel like a hero. The problem is entire drafts lack something to eventually kill Kunkka. Timbersaw, very similar in my opinion. Like, if you have a Batrider on your team, it doesn't matter if he lanes against the Timbersaw. Timbersaw is killable at some point in the game. The problem is when he's unkillable.
Yep. All right, here's the last question I wanted to cover, because I think this is a good one to end on. Just Be Humble Motivation says, I'm stuck at 5.2k. How do I get to 6k? I stopped university for that, and I'm still stuck here aiming to pro.
That's a hard one. I mean, from my personal experience in playing in the Divine bracket in the previous couple of weeks, I would say that the largest difference between Divine and Immortal is the fact that in Divine, people just fucking run at fights for no purpose whatsoever other than fighting. People don't counterpick. People don't essentially take advantage of good opportunities or dodge bad opportunities. People just go to everything and commit on everything. Like if you look at Immortal, so basically what I'm saying is in Divine, people will just fight until they die. No matter what, whether or not they have spells, whether it's in the laning phase, they will almost always just commit to everything. In Immortal, people think about whether or not to commit. A lot of the time in Immortal, like when I'm laning, I've been feeding a lot in lanes when I'm playing on my main, because in Divine, people won't kill me when they know that they can kill me. Or if I run into the trees, they'll keep chasing me, even though it's now a bad play for them to do that. They die to me, I get a triple kill, I crush the Divine game. But in Immortal, they don't chase me into the trees because they know that action is no longer good. Like, essentially, I would say that the biggest difference between those two brackets is that in Immortal, people will cancel actions. They won't just commit to some shit because it's happening. They will think about, like, what is the purpose for doing that, and they'll constantly think about it, and they'll, like, sacrifice their team dying, whether it's in the lanes, whether it's they'll sacrifice Roshan, whether it's they'll sacrifice a fucking barracks. If it's not good, they won't do it in Immortal, or at least they'll be better at, like, selecting these situations. So that's actually been an adjustment for me playing on my main, is that like I can't just pick Necro in every game because people are picking Jug. They're taking advantage of openings that I'm leaving. So I would basically just recommend start not showing up to fights that are bad. Don't show up to them. If the enemy team has a bad hero that you can counterpick it. Like take advantage of the things that the enemy team is leaving open to you. And when you have openings, when something looks bad, make sure to do something else. Don't just commit to everything with your team. That's basically what I'm saying. Don't commit to everything with your team because you'll win so many games from just that one fight that you didn't take because it was fucking terrible and then you're alive, you split push, and then all of a sudden in the late game you're really strong because you didn't die at all in the early game because your team was fighting and you allowed them to make space for you, and then you could eventually carry. Like that's how I won. I have like a 95% win rate on that Smurf or something like that. It was because I just thought everybody was like idiots and fighting, and a lot of the time we'd go super late game because for some reason my Slark is fighting without his ultimate, without his BKB, but then I would eventually get a good scythe off on Necrophos because I wasn't dying, I got an Aghanim Scepter, and then I'd win the game. Like not going to an opportunity that is potentially there because it's bad will give you opportunities later in the game. You just have to like accept the loss. It's really important to accept the loss, and that is not something that Divine players do. They do not accept losses. They will fucking commit to everything, no matter what.
Yep, and the only things I want to add to that are spend some time figuring out what has allowed you to be a 5.2k player. Is it your picking? Is it your mechanics? Is it your heroes that you play? Is it your strategy? Is it your supporting? Like whatever it is, figure out what that is, and then once you know that, figure out whether you're using that as a crutch for just keeping you at that MMR. Like, for example, I know that there's a lot of people that play, you know, heroes exclusively like Meepo or Broodmother or Huskar or something like that, but then they're just not good at any other heroes or not nearly as good at other heroes. And so they'll try picking, you know, a meta hero and they'll lose a game, and then they'll lose another game on another meta hero, and then they'll just play Huskar for like 4 games in a row and win all 4 of them. And now they're back to like their MMR that they were before. And so that might be the reason that somebody is at a certain level and then they're plateauing, is because they just simply don't have other options. Another thing might be like, maybe you have really, really good mid and late game strategic thinking. Maybe you are very good at selecting what fights to go to and when to take objectives and when to push, but you're fucking ass at laning, and like your last hitting is terrible and your itemization is terrible. And so while you have very good strategic mind for the game, you need to really brush up on some other very basic stuff. You know, like there's a lot of reasons that you can win games of Dota. Sometimes it's your picks, and sometimes it's your itemization, and sometimes it's your decision making, and you need to figure out what's actually getting you to this MMR, and that's going to allow you to know what's holding you back as well.
That is a common situation where you're picking Huskar, gaining a lot because of that, and then you stop doing it, you fall, and you just keep going back and forth. I've seen that a lot, and that happens with me too, where it's like, I'll really care about picks, I'll win a lot, and then I'll all of a sudden start first picking my hero because I don't want people to steal my role, and then it's like, oh man, this is losing me so many games, because now I'm Necrophos versus a fucking Juggernaut who's just spinning on me in lane and killing me, and in every other game that I played when I was climbing, I was Necrophos versus no counters because I would wait to pick it. So it's like a very simple change like that can actually totally fuck you over, and, you know, sometimes things are cyclical in life. Well, always life is cyclical. That is just how we are as creatures. We are creatures of habit, and basically, if you're stuck at 5.2k MMR, you're in a cycle, and you need to do something to break that cycle. And that's why in the video about plateauing, I basically talk about you need to do something to get out of your comfort zone. You need to just do anything that you possibly can to introduce change into your life, so that whatever cycle you're in, you're going to make a change, whether it's for better or for worse. You need to make a change, or you'll keep plateauing. And the only way to do that is to break the cycle. The only way to break the cycle is to step out of your comfort zone. I don't know, go sleep naked or something like that. Whatever gets you off. Try shrooms. I shouldn't endorse that. I'm not. I don't do drugs, but
watch your replays. Like, do something other than just grind games all day. You know?
Yeah, just do anything different. Even in life, do anything different. Start a band. I don't fucking know. Just something to break the cycle, because you're in a cycle if you're plateauing. You just need to get out of the cycle. That's it.
Yep. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching Alchemy Answers episode 20. The episode will be live on YouTube here in the next day or so. I need to release episode 19 because I forgot to do that, so that'll come out today. And then 20 will probably be out tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah, ripping pepperonis. But
thank you guys for your questions as always. And just to shamelessly plug it again, if you want your questions answered guaranteed every single week on Tuesday, please support us on Patreon, because that allows us to continue to make all this content, do these streams, and help everybody get better at Dota, including ourselves. So Peace out, everybody. Good luck in your games, and we'll see you next time.